So Kathryn, Johnson & Johnson is one of the world's sort of largest healthcare firms. We could also think about it as a consumer goods firm as well as a healthcare firm, so it straddles a lot of sectors. These are products that people in every country use. Probably your products are probably sold in every country, I imagine. And you also have a hugely diverse range of raw materials that you need, and your supply chains pass through a lot of different countries. And this has been the case for decades. So J&J's been this major player in global supply chains. So you're the chief supply chain officer for J&J. Thinking about the trends that you see happening in different markets around the world, what do you think are the top 3 challenges for global supply chains for the next 10 years?
Well, first, thank you for having us here. It's wonderful to be here. To your point, Johnson & Johnson is famous for our consumer products, a baby shampoo, Band-Aids. That's actually the smallest part of our business. So as we're the world's largest healthcare manufacturer, we have 350,000 different products sold in nearly every country around the world. We do 100,000 orders a day in our supply chain to customers. So indeed, it is a global company at the global challenge. For us, I'd say the top 3 challenges. First, without a doubt, it's digitization. So for those 350,000 products, we no longer make only the product. So we need to make its digital twin. So with every product, the data around that product, what is its pedigree? What are the ingredients in that product? How does that connect over time to healthcare outcomes? Our business is not only the consumer business, we have a pharmaceutical business, which is the largest portion in sales dollars. It's nearly half of our company. In infectious diseases, working on Ebola, on Zika, TB. And so the ability to take that digital data and be able over time to build the digital thread in healthcare is incredibly important. We're also the world's largest medical device manufacturer. If you've ever had surgery and you've ever had stitches, 80% of the sutures on the planet are made by us. And unfortunately, the healthcare system in any country in the world is notoriously fragmented. So being able to create the digital twin of the product and start to build with government, with healthcare providers, depending on if the country is public or private, build that digital thread.
What does the digital twin of a product mean? Yeah. Is it like a database of specifications? Or?
Yeah, so again, depending on the type of product and the type of customer need for that data, it can vary a lot. So if you take a pharmaceutical medicine, many countries in the world now have serialization requirements that literally every product, every individual bottle or unit of use or blister pack has its own unique identifier, and that we can trace that from the manufacturing plant it's made in, where we must, by law, maintain the list of ingredients, the lot numbers, the traceability back to the point of origin. And then that serial number is passed then to a distributor, a wholesaler, to a pharmacy that buys it, to a reimbursement system. And what that will allow over time with that, as we connect that digital thread, is to build healthcare systems that are more based on outcomes. So today, we all pay by use. If we go to our doctor, we pay, or the government pays, whether we're cured or not. And so over time, as the populations around the world are aging, as healthcare becomes more complicated, that sort of pay by use will be replaced more and more by pay for outcomes. But it's impossible the way the systems are structured today. You don't have that connectivity to trace, that direct correlation at times. So that's a big part of our challenge. Another challenge I would say is around partnerships globally. So no company no matter how large, so there are 60,000 employees in the supply chain that are part of my team. So we're nearly half of Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson is 130,000 people. Nearly half of them work somewhere in my organization, in manufacturing and distribution and quality, but it's impossible to do it ourselves. So the manufacturing partners we choose, the suppliers that we work with around the world, externally, how we work commercially in markets as business models change, the ability to select partners and maintain long-term relationships, whether they're big or small, is another important challenge.
Who are typically your most important partners? Does it differ by market type, or?
Sure. So if I think about on the on the supplier side, so at J&J we have a long history of using SMEs as well as large. So as a global player, we need certain global partners. You can think of for ingredients or things that or distributors, 3PLs. I was just visiting one of our partners here, third-party logistics provider. So help us extend our distribution reach. Just visiting our partner here in the UAE during this trip. So some you create, global partners because you need to get that scale and that long-term relationship. But also equally important are the long-term relationship with SMEs.
Yeah. Interesting to mention the international dimension, because something that we've been talking a lot about for these last few days is the new manufacturing technologies. So 3D printing, automation, additive manufacturing. And a question that's come up, and we don't yet have an answer, but it's maybe, John, your experience, you might have the inside track. Are supply chains now going to shrink? So now that we can, say, print something at need, are we going to see an end to international supply chains, and we'll just make everything where it's needed?
That's a trillion-dollar question, I think, in some ways. I would say, I think over time, so I think the global supply nature, we're past that point of no return. So global supply is an important part of how our whole global economy works. I don't see that going away. However, by industry, the ability of additive manufacturing to transform completely not only the manufacturing model but the business model will absolutely happen. Now, I think that depending on how regulated your industry is, that will take more or less time. So if you're making XYZ, I don't know what to pick, a headphone, there's certain regulations, but the ability to do that and to pick up and transform that supply chain will happen faster, frankly, than it will if I'm making a knee that's going to be implanted in someone's body. It's going to be there for 30 years. So the material characteristics of being able to print that knee, the ability to prove in clinical trials that that knee performs as well or better than one made out of solid titanium, how regulators create a regulatory pathway for medicines that are printed. So that's just starting, but the ability to do that globally is important. IP is incredibly important in our industry, as in many other industries. So how you control IP in those situations and make sure that your brand is truly being reflected and not altered in what's happening are some elements.
Do you see a shift in J&J from manufacturing in, say, lower cost locations for export to wealthier markets? Do you see a shift to manufacturing in the wealthier economies directly because of these technologies?
So we have, as a company, we've never been a chaser of labor rates, let's say, around the globe. So we believe that we need the ability to define our supply chain in the way that makes most sense for our customers. Now, we must be cost efficient. We have a responsibility. We have a long-standing, our credo, which is how we run our company. It's a set of principles that have been with us since the Johnson family founded our company. And it talks about our responsibilities to our, first and foremost, to the patients and customers and surgeons who use our product. The responsibility to quality is the second piece. The responsibility to continue to reduce costs on a regular basis is the third part of that very first paragraph. But in healthcare, chasing labor rates is not a sustainable process. The regulatory framework is complicated. To build a biologics medicine plant where you're building cells is $1 billion venture.
So you don't think these technologies are going to change where you have your manufacturing?
They absolutely will, but the timing and how we do that, I think will vary dramatically, even within our businesses. So what we can do in our consumer business to potentially print makeup that's part of our Neutrogena line would look very different than what we'll do in our medicines. But so I think it would allow us to get much closer to many sets of customers. We don't want to be moving huge bottles of baby shampoo. Today we do that regionally. So how we're able to use lots of different manufacturing technologies to stop moving large quantities of heavy stuff and get them done closer will absolutely happen. But we don't see that as a wealthy, non-wealthy country discussion.
Okay.
It's a discussion about where our customers are and how we use the technology.
Can I push you to name some names?
Okay.
And any ideas you've got about which countries you think will get more manufacturing because of these technologies, and any countries you think are at risk of having a smaller role in supply chains?
So first, I don't. It's not that I don't want to answer. I don't really think of that way. So we have 115 internal J&J plants around the world, equally balanced in all regions. So we're not over tilted one or the other. That's developed over 130 years, so 130-year-old company. And we buy and sell companies and businesses along the way that adds and subtracts from that. But we also use today 600 different external manufacturing partners, 5 of them in this region just locally. So we are constantly renewing our portfolio.
Yep.
I will say that from our perspective, the number one criteria to select them is to assure the safety and efficacy of our products and the quality. So it all starts with that. And from there, it's about how we're improving that.
So I guess the regulatory environment is then an important factor for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so countries, I'll say that the role of public-private partnership, especially when you're talking about technology shifts like what additive can bring, having a regulatory pathway, it's not only enough to have governments engaged in helping create the manufacturing environment, which is terrific, and we need more governments to do that. And we also, as industry, need to come to the table as partners. But you have to understand that in our world, even if you can make it, if the health authorities don't have the process to approve a 3D printed pill, then we're not going to be able to go there. So it's got to be a collaborative piece, not only on investment, but on regulatory pathways that allow new technology to come into the world in a faster pace, frankly, than we have today.
Right.
But again, knowing in healthcare, these are people's lives, right, that are at stake.
Are regulations getting more or less fragmented? I mean, as in, is there an increasing drive towards, localization, like local standards requiring local manufacturing and that kind of stuff, or is there more convergence allowing you to do things faster and at scale across multiple markets?
So I'd say, depending on what part of regulations we're talking about, if you talk about, let's say, a Ministry of Health set of regulations, say we see absolutely more global collaboration. I've been personally working in that space for 20 years. I remember aspiring 25 years ago that just the US and the Europeans could collaborate. Still today, we're just starting to have one maybe accept inspections of the other. But that's a big part of what we do as a company is advocate the more consistent we are in global standards, it lifts up healthcare for everybody, and it also makes us more competitive. But then there's trade regulations, there's tax regulations. And in an industry, again, like ours, those have an equal weight. So what is your tax strategy? How is your supply chain set up to maximize that in a fair way? What are the trade rules? And I think we all know in the current political environment, the swing to globalization now, that I'm a big believer that most things in life have a kind of a pendulum, right? Yeah. And I think the pendulum's starting to swing back a little bit to say, how do we help all countries have an equal role in that global
Yeah.
economy. So that national goal every country has, is certainly getting a lot more visibility today.
Something, again, that we've spoken about is whether integration into global supply chains is still an option for the emerging markets of today. I guess moving away from the specifics of healthcare, I mean, you have good visibility over a lot of international supply chains in different sectors. We've seen countries like China or Malaysia, reach upper middle or higher income status through, essentially there's only been one path, which has been enter global supply chains, labor-intensive manufacturing, gradually move up the value chain. Do you think that option is still there for the next wave of emerging markets like India and Nigeria, or is technology giving them a completely different challenge?
Well, I think that ability to enter the global supply chain is absolutely there, and if anything, technology actually enables it to happen faster and differently. I mean, what I love about this conference here is you look at, we're not talking about the manufacturing of the past, we're talking about the manufacturing of the future and how that enables that. So I think technology makes it much easier. And again,
why do you think it makes it easier? Because that's actually not the usual perspective.
Yeah, because I think that the capital, in many cases, the capital intensity is much lower. If you talk distributed manufacturing, the ability for smaller startups to get in faster. And I personally believe, and again, industries vary greatly, right? But in healthcare, this constant chasing of the lowest costs, if you think about the capital and the human effort that goes into that, versus how do you enable an entire workforce in a country to get engaged? How can you, through a variety of industries, create a variety of opportunities, some that are very manual intensive, and some that are highly technology enabled.
Another element of international manufacturing is sort of corporate social responsibility and standards for things like the environment, for safety, for labor standards. And it's just a fact that public concern about those standards differs across markets. Yep. Some markets are very concerned about the environment. Other markets are not concerned at all. Of course, attitudes are changing over time, and public opinion about the importance of one topic or another is evolving. So, as someone who operates across, almost every country in the world, where do you see the pressure for improved standards showing itself the most?
So I would say first that transparency and access to information is the great equalizer. So if you think about what technology and just the smartphone has done in anyone's ability, almost anywhere on the planet today, to understand how different countries manage the environment, how other industries manage safety. It used to be, you could sort of compartmentalize things and you could meter out how you increase standards in a country, I'll say. I think that's, that access of any citizen on this planet to see different standards is going to transform the expectations on governments. I'd start there. As a company, we have been unwavering since the time we were founded 100 years ago in our belief that everyone deserves, first and foremost, a company that's earning its right to exist, if they work for Johnson & Johnson or in the products they buy from us. So without a doubt, it must be safe. We need a safe place to come to work. I want every person to go home not only healthier but happier than when they came into work. Our environmental standards. So in our Credo document 75 years ago, talking about our responsibility to resources on the planet. So we have the same standards for safety, for environmental, for our plants, for our products, everywhere in the world. Now, in many countries, and some countries, that puts us at a competitive disadvantage because our competitors are not always doing that. But we stand up to also be, we hope, a good partner with governments with NGOs to help improve that. So we believe you cannot have a healthy citizenry if you don't have a healthy environment. So if you're working in a smog-filled city, you're not going to be the healthiest you can be. And Johnson & Johnson's all about human health. So we're on a spectrum, we may be, a little bit more on one edge. But I would say in any country that's moving up that evolution, I believe it all starts with safety. If people can't be safe in how they're working, if people are getting hurt, if the products that are being allowed to come out of that country are counterfeit medicines that could kill people, I mean, that is the basic right to exist as a business and an entity, and that always comes first. And then you come to the environment, and then I believe at the end of the day, then quality becomes your differentiator, is the quality of the product you're producing, your company, your country, your industry, is that differentiating yourself on the global and local playing field.
So safety coming out as
Absolutely.
As the area where there's the biggest pressure.
Absolutely.
We're down to, in fact, we've used up our last minute. But if I can ask you just to give just a very quick response, because I did want to ask you about the role of women in manufacturing. I know that's something that you have been quite involved in. How engaged, what's the status of gender equality in global supply chains, and what's the biggest priority? What's your key message for this audience to progress that agenda?
So key message is, if we think about not only manufacturing but broader STEM, there are millions of unfilled STEM jobs in the world, and there is still tremendous inequality. In my role, Chief Supply Chain Officer in a Fortune 500 company, 5% of those jobs are filled by women. So I know most of the other women, 5%. Having said that, we have to work much earlier. It's not only about, so 20% of the senior roles would be female in the world. So as Johnson & Johnson, we know to fill our need for scientists, for doctors, for engineers, manufacturing, we need to be able to pull more women into the system. So I'm very happy to be leading a Youth Circle conversation this afternoon, specifically on this topic here at the summit for a couple hours. And in J&J, we have an initiative over the last couple of years where we're working globally on young girls, kindergarten through 12, through global partners. We know girls from the time they enter school start to get signals about science and math, and just silently tracked in some ways out. We're partnering with universities around the globe on professorships, on role modeling, on increasing graduation rates. Because again, the pool, so I'll give you a US number, 22 going into university, only 22% of women plan to get STEM degrees, and 9% do. So again, another fall off in university. And then when you go into the workforce, women, are twice as likely, if not more, to leave a STEM field in their career. So I'm an engineer by education. 2 or 3 times more likely to leave it and move to another function than men are. So every part of life, we have a chance to help the system increase the pool, which we're going to need for the amount of scientists and manufacturing we need for the future.
Right, unfortunately we are out of time. Sorry to the audience that I didn't get a chance to come to you, but I promise in the next session I'll do better timekeeping, so we have some time for audience questions. It's been great to hear the perspective from your big experience in operating these many supply chains. Certainly I've had a bit of an insight into some of the specifics of how some of these technologies are going to play out. But we still have lots of unanswered questions, and more discussions need to come for the rest of the day. Thanks very much, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.